to you, doctor, of course, in your office. Uh, Big thing that happens this time of year, right? New Year. Other than messing up our, writing checks and writing the date, uh, a lot of people decide to change their lives. They just resolve to do certain things. New Year's resolutions. Why do they exist? One, and why are they completely? If most people never, they last a week, right?
New Year's resolutions is one of those things that frequently gets researched, right?
Hmm.
Um, and what makes it interesting is that it happens after New Year's, right? There's something about the romanticism associated with Christmas, New Year's, whenever the New Year is, that we kind of take it upon ourselves to make promises to ourselves that most more often we don't complete, right? We don't keep. And it happens every year, I mean, there are a number of different resolutions that people tend to make, and usually have to do with problems you have, whether it's because you're overweight or because you drink too much or because you get in a lot of trouble with other people. So we get into wanting to change, right? Now, there are a number of psychological and social reasons why we don't fulfill our promises, right? And it's not only, excuse me, not only related to New Year's resolutions. It really has to do with any resolution. It just that happens that in New Year's we tend to get very serious about starting a new thing, right? I think it has to do with the idea of this. We're starting a year anew. We want to be new too, right? So we want to be different. So it is very altruistic to think of ourselves in that sense, but at the end of the day, whether it's losing weight, quit smoking, drinking, using drugs, whatever it is, I mean, one big one is we're going to start saving money, right? And most people start with a lot of drive and then things kind of die down. I mean, there's actually some statistics about this, and it is believed that probably by the second week of February, 80% of the people who have tried to start something new just drop it.
I briefly worked in the gym industry, and that was the big thing. Yeah, they get this huge flood of gym memberships, people signing up, and I remember looking at the numbers. I'm like, oh my god, if all these people sign up, this gym's going to be completely crowded. And they say, don't worry about it. I said, why not? They go, within 2 weeks. I think, yeah, by mid-February, over 80% of the people that signed up will never come back, and they know this.
Yeah, and we all have made promises. We all have been victims of our own uh, drive and not accomplish certain things, right? So when you look at humans in general, we have this thing about habit, right? We tend to fall back into things that are habitual, things that are familiar to us. So change is not an easy thing. It takes a very long time. So to create a new habit, you have to dedicate a lot of time. It's no different than starting a new business, right? So everybody wakes up from a hangover on January 2nd or January 1st, whatever, and they says enough. I'm going to stop, right? The problem is that think about starting a business like that, right? You have no plan, you have no vision, you have no mission, you don't even know why to start the business except that you know it's good for you. And then you embark on doing a lot of things quite intensely, but with no plan.
Mm.
So, if you want to succeed at anything that has to do with creating new habits, you have to develop a plan first. And then you have to document your plan. And then you have to follow it. And there are different psychologists and psychiatrists have different advice into how to go about it. But the basic thing is that you have to be realistic, right? I remember when I was much younger, I used to smoke, right?
Really
Yeah, many, 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 many
interesting.
years ago. I probably haven't smoked for more than 30 years, right? But there was a time when it was cool to smoke, and I used to smoke, and I was addicted to nicotine, right? And for many years, I promised myself in December, I'm going to quit smoking. Okay. I mean, even after my children were born, I was still smoking a little bit, right? And then it became not cool to smoke, so you had a lot of social pressure to quit smoking. But I used to smoke in my car. I would say I'm not going to smoke anymore, and then 2 weeks later, I'm smoking again. And the reality is that I didn't have a plan. It wasn't until I developed a plan of action, like any of the businesses that I have started in the past, and say, this is how I'm going to do it. And I know there's going to be pain associated with, and this is how I'm going to cope with the pain associated with it, right? And then I quit smoking. I haven't smoked ever since. Now, I have to tell you that probably quitting smoking when you're addicted to nicotine is the most
Very
difficult
difficult.
thing to control in the addiction science, right? Is a very painful process. So I always advise my patients who want to quit smoking to not say on December 31st or January 1st, now is the time for me to quit smoking. You have to start like early November developing your plan, right? And write it down and say, these are the steps I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to do if I relapse, right? And what usually happens is that we always end up dealing with change in an acute basis, meaning
Mhm.
whether it's a crisis, like my dad's drinking too much, I have to put him in the hospital and get him detoxified, or somebody tells you if you don't change your behavior or you don't lose weight, I'm going to leave you, right?
Ultimatums.
Ultimatums. So that those are very strong social pushes to make change. However, uh, if there is no consistency with the process, right, then you fall 80% are going to fail, right?
As you know, I was very fortunate, got to work with some pretty impressive people in military special operations. There's one gentleman in particular who had a very interesting career arc. He started as basically a stoner skateboarder, professional skateboarder, then joined the army when he decided to straighten out his life and rose to become an officer in the highest, also in the highest levels of special operations. And now he's back in the civilian world and has picked another focus. He does cornhole, the little game,
Hmm.
trick shots. Amazing guy. And I once asked him, I said, "How have you accomplished all these things?" And he said, "Oh, very simply." And it's a lot what you're talking about. He says, "First, you have to pick a realistic goal." He says, "One of the worst things I think," he said, "that we've told our kids and we tell ourselves that we can achieve anything." And that's not actually true. If you're 4 feet tall, you're not going to play in the NBA, right? It's just not going to happen. So, a realistic goal. Not like you said, someone say, "I'm going to quit smoking in 2 days." Well, that's not realistic. So maybe say I'm going to quit smoking in 6 months. So a realistic goal. The second thing was a realistic time frame. Another thing, we want everything so fast. He said, "Yeah." He says, I have 5 year plans, 10 year plans, 6 year plans." And then the last thing was picking those, I said, small achievable goals based on your baseline where you're starting that you can get a little bit of feedback in. So he always talked about it like a ladder. He says the big layer goal is the ladder goes to where your goal is. The pitch of the ladder is really, the length of the ladder is the time frame, and the pitch of the ladder is kind of the difficulty factor. So smaller little incremental steps of the rungs of the ladder. He says a lot of people think they're not doing enough. He goes, that's the only way to make consistent progress.
Well, that's not only true. It's actually a technique, and you kind of describe it beautifully. It's called SMART. That and the SMART actually stands for specific goal that you can measure, that is achievable, realistic, and time bound. Let me give you an example. Because one of the big ones, and you work in the training area and gyms and things like that, it's always been weight gain, right?
Mhm.
Weight gain is a significant problem that's significant effect on your self-esteem, and not unusually people tend to gain weight during the holidays, right? So they were 20 pounds overweight. Now they're 30 because of the holidays and excessive drinking and too much food and all that. So they say by the end of January, I have to lose 30 pounds. Well,
Not very realistic. Well, you could do
well,
it, but you have to chop a limb off or be addicted to meth or something.
yeah, well, you see, here's the math. If you want to lose weight, you either have to burn extra 3,000 calories or reduce your calorie intake by 3,000 calories to lose 1 pound, right? So 3,000 calories, 1 pound. So I always have to advise people, listen, why don't you think about losing a pound a week? It's an achievable goal. You can measure your calories in 7 days, trim 30,000 calories from that. And if you lose a pound a week and you do it for the next year, you lose 52 pounds.
There you go.
Yep. But no, everybody wants to lose the 30 pounds immediately,
Yep.
right? And we all have heard it. So we need to get into having goals that are very specific, which is losing weight, that is measurable, right? And that is realistic, that is achievable. Okay. And you have to be very consistent. And some people talks about, well, use your social environment as a support, right? Like say, this week I lost 1 pound, and you kind of share it with your significant other or with your family or with your best friend, to hear support. And the next week you lose 2 pounds, and the third week you don't lose any weight. But you are averaging a pound a week. Because what happens is that we always get really frustrated with not achieving that specific goal of 1 pound a week.
Mm,
But people need to think in terms of, okay, I need to lose 4.3 pounds per month, which is the percentage of the month, right? I don't care if you lose it in a week or if you lose it in 4.3 weeks, you're losing 4.3 pounds, right? So people have to not become obsessive, because the obsessiveness distracts you from the plan, right? The goal becomes more important than you. So if you are going to lose weight, or you're going to quit smoking, or you're going to quit drinking, you have to do it because it's good for you, because you are worth doing it for, right? Now, we have the other side, which is our habitual behavior, what we've done for a very long time. And it's very easy to go back to what removes anxiety and frustration from us.
mm,
So in my brain, if I feel anxious and I know there is something called alcohol or cigarettes that can bring that anxiety down, we're fighting against that. So we have to become conscious of it, right? Because we do it automatically. And when we talk about substance abuse, we're consistently talking about relapse, right? What makes people relapse into eating again? What makes people relapse into drinking or smoking? Most of the time is we finding the right excuse, right? And usually people need to recognize that our failure to maintain a behavior is the result of us being needing to have a way to express our frustration, right? So if I'm frustrated with me, my behavior starts to change, right? And that how does that get manifested? It gets manifested as mood changes,
mm.
frustration, anger, right? You start picking fights at work, you get frustrated because somebody asks you for a favor, so on. And it starts building up, right? And then you get home and you start picking fights with people at home, right? And then they get bad, then you start having some difficulty sleeping, you're still moody, you're fighting with your significant other or with your children, and one day you explode, right? And then you say, I have to get out of here. I can't take it anymore. So you want get in your vehicle or the bus or the metro or whatever, and then you go by the liquor store,
Hmm.
right? And then you pick up a bottle of beer or whatever, and then you get back to your place. And then you start pointing the finger at your significant other and your children and say, you are responsible. I'm drinking because of you. So part of the habitual behavior is very unconscious.
Hmm.
And we have to recognize it, identify it, and we have to avoid it. We have to become restrictive. I mean, let me give you an example of how strong this is. I haven't smoked for 30 years probably or more. Um, whenever I'm in a reunion of people and somebody starts smoking and I smell it, I want it.
Wow.
30 years later. Okay. But I know that if I get one cigarette, I'll start smoking again. So I cannot allow myself to do that to me. I mean, I don't need to go and find somebody to say, it is your fault. You've been bothering me too much. I had to have a cigarette. No, you cannot do that. You have to train yourself to be responsible for what you're doing to you. Right? So whenever people come and say, well, sometimes I have a couples and their husband or the wife starts pointing the finger at each other, I said, why don't you guys grab that finger and point it to yourself?
Hmm.
Because you are only in control of the choices you make. The moment that you start pointing the finger at other people for your faults, you're empowering them, right? So why do you want to empower people to have so much control over you that they'll make you drink? Becomes
So
your
it's
own thing.
so it sounds like a key to accomplishing, well, any goal, but in particular these resolutions, is really to start off with developing a greater sense of value for yourself.
Well, you see,
Because it sounds
if
like the motivation has to be you. It's not other people. Just like you can't blame other people, it has to be you.
well, you see, we all have a need to be liked. We all have a need to be recognized. We all have somewhat of a need to be admired. But we constantly talk about how much and how often, and how dependent you are on those needs. So if I want to lose weight because I want people to tell me that I've lost weight and it makes me feel good because of what they're saying, I'm going to feel bad when they stop saying it, right? Because I have a need. Now, that doesn't mean that I cannot be narcissistic and I want people to like me and recognize me. Yes, but how much? And what happens when you don't have it, right? So that balance of all humans have to have is going to direct a lot of your choices. So if I want to lose weight because I want to look good, right? And I forget that I'm doing it also because it's good for my health and my longevity and my needs and my all of those different things, then you're forgetting you. There's nothing wrong with saying I want to look better, right? Or I want to not smell to cigarettes when I'm close to people, right? That's fine. But you have to remember that at the end of the day, the only you all you have. I mean, everybody else is chooses to be around you, okay? But they don't have to be around you. Everybody around you has the choice of not being with you. You don't. You have to be with you all the time, and as we said all the time, you go to bed with you every night and you wake up with you every morning. And that's the only constant in your life. And I'm not saying that you should forget the world, but you need to know what you have to give.
So if somebody is looking to move forward this year, finally, and get one of these things accomplished, we've discussed briefly that the goal has to be realistic. There has to be a significant time frame associated with it. That weird impatience in our society to have it tomorrow. Um, but what other factors, and or maybe more specifically, what resolutions that you are aware of that people absolutely can attain?
You see, what is interesting is that all of those people, and not all of those people, most of the people who make resolutions for New Year, they're being honest. They really want to do that. It's actually a window of opportunity to look at uh, what bothers you by yourself, right? If you
Mm,
look at it backwards, it's an opportunity for you to say, I'm not happy with me here. Not I'm fat, I look bad, nobody likes me. But reverse that into, okay, this is not good for me. Okay. Yes, it would be nicer if people were more attractive to me. It would be nicer if I can lose 2 inches from my waist. It would be nicer if I don't have to smell like cigarette all the time or being kicked out of bars, and having to call my family to come and pick me up, things like that. But not because of them, but because of you. So it's an opportunity to tell you, why are you doing this to yourself? You know? Now, so all of those um, windows of opportunity, weight, addiction, size, attitude, whatever your motivation is to change, is an opportunity for you to say, I have to start here, right? This moment with these things that I don't like about me. Not that other people don't like about you, that you don't like about you. But don't wait until the end of the year, right? Start early with a goal and say, I'm going to start at the beginning of December by losing a pound a week, by getting myself a nicotine patch, right? That I'm going to wear at different stages. I'm going to talk to my doctor. I'm going to look at what are the different options for quitting alcohol, reducing the alcohol consumption. There's a lot of medicine around those things nowadays. Or basically saying, I'm going to reduce my cigarette consumption to 5 cigarettes a day for a week, and then four, and then three, and then two, and then one. And then after that, I'm going to feel like smoking a lot, and I'm not going to smoke, right? There's a lot of different ways of doing this, but you have to sit down and make a plan
mm,
and share your plan with somebody who's very close to you, who you can use as a monitor and saying, you know, I'm going to call you once a week and let you know how I'm doing, right? And if you think that I'm getting out of shape, feel free to tell me that I need to get back into doing the right thing for the right reason, meaning you. Because one of the things that happens with um, New Year's resolutions in general is that nobody's going to give you a medal,
mm.
right? There is no like prize at the end, not an objective prize that somebody's going to come and say, oh, pat in the back, you did fantastic, keep at it.
Yeah,
No.
congrats for achieving your resolution. Now go on to the next step.
Yeah, but you see, one of the things that also happens is that once you fulfill a resolution, then you have to maintain it
Mm,
because it's good for you. So, I mean, the whole issue of relapsing into dysfunctional habits or addictions is a major problem. And we used to think a lot about um, absolute abstinence, right? Like if you drink, and that's kind of the basis of AA, if you drink, you cannot drink.
mhm.
That has actually changed somewhat nowadays in terms of it's like cancer, right? You either kill it or you don't, or the cancer will kill you. The same thing happens with addiction. Now in the treatment of cancer, there's a lot of movement toward controlling it. What if I can control your cancer for the next 20 years and you're 65 years old, right?
You're going to die natural causes before you die of the cancer.
Correct. So the same thing is happening with alcohol because not every person with an alcohol problem is the same. And we tend to look uh, to a very narrow glass when we look at alcoholism, for example, in terms of you must stop drinking, right? But we have to look at the whole movie. Does this individual have an anxiety disorder that I need to treat? Does this patient have significant trauma growing up? Right? Is there a history of depression? What purpose does the alcohol serve in this particular individual, and how can we work with it? Right? So we are moving away from one size fits all, because what was happening with that is that if somebody wasn't able to fulfill the resolution of not drinking anymore and has done it a number of times, we give up
Mm.
and they give up, right? And then the alcohol will kill you, just like cancer. So imagine that we said everybody has to do this type of cancer treatment, and everybody who's not willing to do it is going to stay outside, right? So we have to strengthen our power internally if we are to be successful at changing our habits. At the end of the day, we're trying to change habits. Some of these habits have a strong biological component, some of them have a strong psychological component, some of them have strong social components. And that's where, when I see people failing, I always suggest maybe you need to see a professional, to look at, is this purely biological, or is a combination of biology and psychology and sociology, or somewhere in between with a little more of this, a little more of that? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to help people, not changing illnesses.
Mm.
So when an individual sees themselves as a walking disorder, their options are very limited. But it's not necessarily that I have to fix them. I just have to help them understand that they are worth trying for. Because my trying doesn't help people. I mean, yes, my knowledge and medications and prescriptions and all that stuff, that is just reduction of symptoms. The hard work comes from the individual. And at the end of the day, it's more of an issue of, what do I do with me?
Mm.
Am I worth it? Am I worth trying for? Right? And the extreme of that is the suicidal people, that they decide they're not, right? And we still have to help them. We don't have to give up on them either, right?
It's interesting you say that. When I used to coach kids and we talked about motivation, we would talk about, after, again, the goal setting is the reality that life is a team sport, right? Recruit a team, have some support. You can't do it all on your own. The second issue is have some self compassion. You will trip up. You will not be perfect. You're going to eat that donut. You're going to have that cigarette. The key is to get back and say, okay, you know what? Yep, I screwed up. Guess what? Tomorrow I can get back on target. Back to that analogy of the ladder, my buddy always said, because one of the problems is people set the rungs so high and so far that when they fall, it's unrecoverable. He says instead, make the rungs very small, right? It's a
Yes.
little slower, but you move along, you gain confidence, and you gain understanding of yourself. And if you slip, you don't slip so far down that it's unrecoverable.
Before we go, I just want to mention, because you kind of remind me on the team sport. You know that I'm a big football fan, and
Hmm.
I watch football all the time. This is my time of the year, right? So I was watching the Bills and Bengals game last night, and it was an opportunity to see the team sport from the emotional point of view, because one of the players fell and had a cardiac arrest,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Falls, cardiac arrest, 10 minutes of CPR, ended up in the hospital. He's still in critical condition. After he was a defensive player after he tackled somebody. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about is the reaction of the teams, where you actually see, I mean, you were seeing grown 20-year-olds, strong, powerful people crying on the field, right? And what you can, I mean, it was so intense that the commentators didn't know what to say. I mean, I could feel it, and I'm in this business, right? So you could see the reaction of the teams, both teams, right? To the point that at one point they were told, you're going to have 5 minutes and come back to play, and the players said no, the game is over.
Wow,
I mean,
that's impressive.
in a business like the NFL, to have a group of people, two teams are fierce opponents. They were fighting for the number first place in the AFC, and they say no. This is not about the game. This is not about us. We cannot, in good conscience, go back and play that game. And they play this. I mean, this was at the end of the first quarter. It wasn't played
Wow,
again. They stopped the game,
incredible.
and it was very few times I've seen that level of intensity. I remember during 9/11, right? I remember January 6th, a couple of years ago. And this time, if you have an opportunity, watch it
I will.
because you're going to see humanity. And, sometimes we forget that we still have that we still have a human part of us that allows us to connect. And in that particular setting, even though these are younger guys and strong guys and with a huge drive to win, they were willing to give everything at that moment. And that's where you can see the empathy, the connection. And we need to get back at valuing those things.
Well, Doctor, once again, much appreciate your information, your insight. Happy New Year to you and to the audience out there. Appreciate you guys listening. Please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you all again next week.
We'll see you next week. Thank you very